Okay, my friends, I have 5 big stories for you today. And so let's start with this. The strike with a new missile is a serious increase in the scale of the war, says Zelensky. Now, he's talking about the ICBM missile that was lobbed into Ukraine yesterday. It was some bluster from Putin showing, see what we can do. We're willing to do this. There was no nuclear warhead, but yeah, it was meant to intimidate. And the second step toward escalation this year after the involvement of North Korean troops. Zelensky's spot on about this, and great t-shirt, by the way. He's absolutely right about this. The world must react to this. There is no strong reaction from the world right now. It's testing you, dear partners. If there is no tough reaction to Russia's actions, it means that they see this as possible. That's right. We're sending signals to each other. Everything that we're doing is sending signals. If you react to it, you send a signal, don't do this. If you don't react to it, you send a signal, hey, they're not going to do anything about it, so we're going to keep doing more. And got to be really careful with this. That's what's going on here. An emergency meeting of the Verkhovna Rasa of Ukraine and NATO will take place on November 26 to discuss the aftermath of yesterday's missile strike on Dnipro. They need to do that, and they need to not just have strong words, but have some kind of response, some meaningful response. Okay, Russia, you've just shot an ICBM missile into Ukraine. NATO is now allowing X or something along those lines to show you that this shall not happen again. If this comes again a second time, NATO is going to allow Y. They need to have that kind of stance, not a strong words, we heavily condemn this. Okay, since March 2024, Russia has supplied North Korea with more, this is big story number 2, with more than 1 million barrels, 56,000 tons of oil, probably in payment for military support, the BBC reported. According to the Open Source Center's analysis of satellite imagery, North Korean tankers made 43 trips between Russian oil terminal and Far East in DPRK ports between March and November 2024. Well, that agreement was signed in June, and so 43 trips between this period of time seems like it's suspicious. Okay, Russia is estimated to have supplied North Korea with more than 1 million barrels of oil since March this year. The oil is payment for weapons and troops Pyongyang has sent to Moscow to fuel its war in Ukraine. These transfers violate UN sanctions, which ban countries from selling oil to North Korea. But what does Russia care? Russia actually is getting a benefit. This is a feature, not a bug. If they're violating UN sanctions and getting away with it, they're helping themselves destroy the international system that they want to poke in the eye. So that's where they are. Okay, Russia has supplied air defense missiles to North Korea in exchange for sending troops to support Russia's war effort in Ukraine. And so that's another thing that they're getting is some military technology. What they actually want to do is bolster their military technology significantly. And rather than have a thriving economy and use a small percentage to have it like in the United States and most of the West, they just take all their money directly right into military technology so that they can then intimidate others around them. Russia has also given economic assistance to the DPRK and various military technologies, including those needed to help North Korea build a reliable space-based surveillance program. Well, that's going to be great, isn't it? Okay, now this is big story number 3. We're talking about the Russian economy. More than 50 Russian banks, 40 securities registrars, and 15 financial officials been targeted by the U.S. Okay, every time they put out sanctions, I think, why didn't we sanction all these guys like in the first level of sanctions and just really cripple them? But okay. Here's what's really important, though. The Russian ruble is being destroyed. It's actually going up. And this is Jay and Kiev has been tracking this for the last week or so from like incrementally every couple of days. It's another point or two up. Like here's the last month. And here's what's happening compared to the US dollar. The higher this number goes, it's against the US dollar, like 1-to-1 would be parity. Like if that was the case, the ruble would be really strong. It's just past 100-to-1 again. Now, it hasn't done that for a long time. If we look out at 5 years, the ruble went way up over here, right? Why did it go way up here? Well, you can see what the date was, right? In 2022. Okay. And it went up to 133 to, okay. And so then there were these actions that took it down. And I'll explain what happened here. And I'm not an economist, but I think I understand enough of what's going on here to be able to help. Okay, two charts reflecting Russia's state of the economy. The Russian ruble is clearly losing value, and that's why the numbers are going up, because you're losing value. You have to pay more rubles to equate to a dollar. And it's not like we're not inflating our currency either in the U.S. So they're really in bad shape. With accelerating speed, this already is happening when the full-scale war started back in 2022, right? So it already happened here, right? It was a significant effect at this point, but then they brought it back down. Now, how did they bring it back down, and what's going on now? Okay, almost 3 years later, the situation has dramatically worsened for Russia. This is a bubble which Russia cannot ignore and sustain for long. Putin must look for a pause within the next month. But why? Okay, Russia's primary countermeasure was to increase the base interest rate, and that worked back then. So what they were doing, so let's look at these two charts here. This is the ruble, right? And we know what's going on with the ruble. And then this is when we're looking at the Russian interest rate. So they jacked up the Russian interest rate, and that's slowed down the economy, and that made this fall. But then it's not working. Even as they're jacking up the Russian interest rate, at the same time, they're still getting this. Yeah, so it's a bad system, or a bad thing all the way around. They can't control this erosion of the value of the ruble, and that's problematic for them. Okay, other things are happening in Russia's economy as well. Russia has an acute problem of producing components for aircraft. Russian aviation expert says, I quote, "I recommend making early bookings because there simply can't be enough seats for everyone due to the fact that there's simply fewer airplanes. Like there's 60 Airbuses, they can only maintain like 30 of them or something along those lines." I talked about that a day or two ago. I don't know that I'd want to get on one of these planes if they can't maintain them, or, yeah, okay. Other issues. 4 accidents in a week occurred in Saratov. 2 on the heating main and 2 on the main water supply. In Russia, depreciation of public utilities is 90%. There's no money for pipes. There's money for war. Now, I don't know that that's entirely fair, that there's no money for pipes because it's all going to war. I mean, like we hear that with Ukraine. There's no money for Ukraine because we have to pay that at the border or what. I don't think that's fair, but I think there's probably a manpower issue. And that could be a manpower, just not enough workers, but that could be new workers that are really poor because the old workers got sent off to the war, and then now these new workers don't know what they're doing, and there's a learning. It could be all kinds of things, but undeniably there's bad problems. Okay, next big story. Sweden will announce significant funding for Ukraine to develop its own long-range missiles. This is where I have my hopes. Okay, it's not just about Sweden. It's about Ukraine providing its own, generating the ability to create its own defense. So even if the worst case scenario happens with Trump, and I don't know what will happen one way or the other, but even if the worst case scenario happened, we're still going to be in a place where we're actually Ukraine is building its own weapons, and all they need is money. They can get money from the West. They can't necessarily get the same weapons, and that's the great fear here. But as they produce their own long-range missiles, the game changes. The center of gravity shifts. Okay, meanwhile, big story number 5. Let's look at what's going on in the United States. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte is set to meet with Donald Trump in the near future. They're not actually meeting today. This is just a picture. They're going to meet shortly to discuss negotiation strategies for resolving Russia's war against Ukraine. Now, they can start at the same place. Now, the upside here is Mark Rutte, who is the Secretary General of NATO, actually has a very good relationship with Trump. He's center right. They get along personally. And so that's a good thing. I don't know that Trump got along nearly as well with Stoltenberg, but with Rutte, they have a good relationship. Now, they're going to start by saying, hey, look, we all want this war to end. And it's a matter of how. And you can't let Russia look like it got one over on you. I mean, I think that will sell very well. A source told the publication that Rutte will aim to convince Trump that a bad deal on Ukraine would harm him as much as it would harm Europe. And so they can speak to these common interests, and I think that they will. Okay, this is a Democrat member of Congress who's on the Intelligence Committee. I believe he's on the Intelligence Committee talking on CNN about, like, you just got to stop listening to Putin and his saber rattling here. Let's hear what he has to say.
First and foremost, we need to stop listening to public statements coming from Vladimir Putin in the Kremlin, right? They feed us a steady diet of the things that we are worried about, of the things that divide us politically. They know how to play us really well. So we just need to stop listening to the Kremlin and Putin. We have intelligence systems and networks that can understand the way that they are moving their troops around, that understand their strategic nuclear weapons. We know how to assess the threat from Russia. But I really wish people would stop saying Vladimir Putin says this or the Kremlin says that. That's one. Number two, there has been a bipartisan coalition in Congress that's been pushing for the expansion and the use of U.S. weapons for over a year now. Ukraine is at war. They're fighting a war that's in our interests, that they win, that they stop Russian aggression dead in its tracks. And we need to start making sure they get the stuff timely. So I hope that it's true that they've authorized this expansion. They have not publicly acknowledged that.
Okay, so there's a bipartisan coalition that really wants to make this work. Now, Republicans are split, but there's a lot of Republicans that actually want to push this thing forward. The trick is going to be both Trump and Speaker Johnson. Okay, yesterday I talked about this in this video here about breaking why Gaetz withdrew for his nomination for Attorney General, and I tried to explain why. Matt Gaetz was a terrible choice for Attorney General. He was nominated, and he's like one of the most MAGA guys in Congress. He's also a zealous opposer of Ukraine aid. Now, that won't matter a whole lot for a couple of reasons. One, he withdrew his nominations. And two, the Attorney General pick probably won't have a lot to do with what's going on with what goes to Ukraine. It's much more domestic than it is anything in foreign policy. But it's good that he's gone. He would have been a terrible pick all the way around for many reasons. Now, I explained why that was, and what you want to look for is, will he run for office again? If he doesn't run for office again, then it's because of I put two theories forward here. I said laid out all the facts, and I said, here's one theory, and then here's another theory, and you just want to see if he runs again. If he runs again, that's one theory. If he doesn't run again, it's very likely that the other theory was involved. And if you want to understand those theories, go watch this particular video here, and I'll explain that there. Now, Trump nominated Pam Bondi to be the new Attorney General. I know that she looks like Barbie. If you look at the comments below, somebody says, first comment is Barbie, but Barbie actually was the Attorney General in Florida. So the difference between Gaetz, who was he was a congressman. It's not like he's not qualified for something, because congressmen or senators are pretty likely to take these positions. But a former attorney general to become the U.S. a former state attorney general to become the U.S. attorney general is actually a logical step. Now, is she going to, if you're liberal, you're probably not going to like her. She's about as conservative / MAGA as anybody else that would have been picked, but she's at least sane. Somebody put here, I thought being an attorney general does not qualify you for anything. No, it qualifies you to become, being a state attorney general qualifies you to become the U.S. attorney general. And then another person put, good replacement. This is a balanced person and is loyal to Trump. And so I think that's correct. You're not going to like her for partisan political reasons if you're on the left, but as far as qualifications, it's a good choice, and she will, I think, sail right through the nominations. And okay, that's where we are. Okay, Axis of Aggression, September 2024 update. This is from the American Enterprise Institute, which is a conservative think tank, and they're showing this chart here, and I want to show you this. This is really interesting. What Russia does for China, what Russia does for Iran, what Russia does for the DPRK, and what they reciprocally do for each other, and it lists all these things out. Like, this is really impressive work being done by the American Enterprise Institute, which is a conservative think tank. AEI is really like, but even more importantly here, it was reposted by Senator John Cornyn. Cornyn was the, once upon a time, he was the whip in the Senate. He's a Republican, so he was number 2. He was in that race against Thune for number 2. Didn't win, but he's also a big supporter of Ukraine as well. Okay, we'll end with this. Vlad Vexler put this out. Putin can just leave Ukraine, in quotes. Well, no, he can't. If he left Ukraine, he would lose power. And if he lost power, he might lose his life together with his clan. So he and those that he supports all are locked. They're frozen in this position. They can't just leave Ukraine. So what negotiating power, like we're just looking at this, what negotiating power does Putin actually have when he knows that he could lose his life? So I'm not optimistic about any deal. As optimistic as Trump might be, I don't see it. All right, my friends, thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.